Welcome to the St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral Docent series. This is the first of what we hope will become an ongoing series, talking with the docents and different members of the cathedral about the history of the cathedral, architectural details, a little bit more of a personal background on how the docents actually came to be in these wonderful positions. My name is Jay Nuring, and I'm privileged to be in the presence of three docents. And I think collectively, we have nearly 200 years amongst the three of you in terms of your history with the cathedral, which is pretty amazing. And of course, the people I'm talking about are Carl Hawker, thanks so much for coming, Lowell Johnson, and David Christofferson. Thank you all so much for being here. We are, for the listeners who aren't able to see us, sitting in the chancel in the choir loft, not far from the altar, in what I suspect would have been really the epicenter of what Edwin Hewitt, the architect, had in mind when he designed this space. The tile on the floor, the carvings in the wood, the limestone that surrounds us on all sides, not to mention the stained glass windows. It's really a sight to behold. Again, thank you guys so much for being here. This is really wonderful. I'm going to start with Lowell. Lowell, you have an interesting background in that you found your faith journey through St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral, and the time leading up to that wasn't the same experience that you've had since finding the cathedral. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I know you came from Duluth, but tell us that history a little bit.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the in Duluth in the Chester Park Evangelical United Brethren Church, a nice, friendly neighborhood church, and went to UMD. And there was a Canterbury Club at UMD, which was a group for college Episcopalians. And I never paid much attention to it because I thought, well, Episcopalians, that's only for the rich people. I knew that there was an Episcopal church in Duluth, beautiful looking church from the outside, but you'd never go in because, well, it was only for wealthy people, that's what I thought. So moving down to the Twin Cities, for a while I wasn't attending church at all, and then how did I end up here? Well,
What year was that, Lowell?
1974.
Okay, just to put things in context.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Carter was in office at that time?
I believe Jimmy Carter. I think so.
No, we don't think so. Okay. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm just remembering that whole centennial era.
Yeah.
And
Gerald Ford.
it was Ford. Okay.
Yeah.
He followed. He was right after. My
So
mistake.
I got interested in English history at UMD, and then when I was down here, I thought I'm missing something. So then why did I end up here? I thought, well, the Episcopal Church, it looks like it's really like a English from the outside. It must have something to do with England, which I was really fascinated with. So I walked in on a Sunday afternoon to an organ concert. Don Small was playing the organ, and I thought, well, that was pretty nice. The music was great, and I looked around, and man, this place is big. And so then I came back that next Sunday, and then there was an educational forum going on. Daniel Pearson lectured something about, I can't remember if it was Puritanism or something, but just a tremendous lecture. And I thought, man, these guys these are real intellectuals. They remind me of my college professors. So what attracted me was the music and the architecture, and then the male role models. Doug Fontaine was the dean. On the staff was Bud Thurston was one of the priests, and then Daniel Pearson. And I thought, man, these guys they're religious. I was trying to figure out what that meant exactly,
Right.
but they're really interesting. They're masculine, kind of masculine and religious at the same time, and they had these great sense of humors, and they were kind of athletic at the same time. So really,
impressionable for you
yeah. So that really appealed to me.
as a young
Yeah.
man, right?
Yeah, and then started, there was a newcomers class led by Dan Pearson, and I met several times with him one-to-one, and then it was always like, well, I don't know I love the church, but I don't know what I believe exactly, you know, all these things that you're talking about. And he says, well, you don't worry about it. Just keep coming to church. It's the experience that's the main thing, not exactly a doctrine that you have to memorize, but you'll learn through the experience, which is what he did. And then
you had mentioned to me one time that it was this welcoming presence that really drew you in.
Yeah.
And your first wife, Shirley, also came to a service on Palm Sunday, and I remember you saying that the literature just blew her away. And you've been coming ever since.
Yeah, coming ever since, yeah. And then a couple of years later, there was in 1976, there was a general convention in downtown Minneapolis with Episcopalians all over the country who were going to vote on whether women could be ordained as priests. And so I got involved in that women's ordination movement before the convention, along with, you know, a lot of people. And it turned out that the general convention, you know, approved that. And so it was like a breath of energy coming into the cathedral. And so it was just, and then just basically started doing everything. Carl's wife, Marilyn, would say, hey, we need someone to teach church school first grade. And I says, well, I'd like to be a college teacher. I don't know anything about first graders. And she said, well, you'll learn, you know. So for about 4 years.
Carl, do you remember Marilyn saying that?
Yeah, no.
No.
So then I think the experience of it, so then for a number of years, it just seemed like, you know, Doug Fontaine especially, who was kind of my mentor, would say, hey, could you do this, or we need you to do this, and somehow I'd say yes, which probably wasn't the greatest plan in the world, but it was the experience of all of those things. Yeah. And the people were so interested, not just, and I'm talking about, I loved the males who were kind of my role models, but the women at the same time, in everything, you know, like every Sunday or every season, there was something.
Right.
It seemed like there was something different, particularly after I think with women's ordination and the 1979, the revision of prayer book, I think meant a whole lot of difference to me.
Right. Before we talk about the prayer book, I just want to ask you about the ordination of women that particular time, 1977, and then shortly after, the first woman ordained in Minnesota was ordained in this cathedral. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Mary Belfry she'd been ordained as a deacon. Now it's her name, Mary Belfry Hansley. She goes by Hansley now, that name of her late husband. But so before the General Convention, women could be ordained as deacons. So she was, you know, on the staff here as a deacon. And then when women's ordination was allowed, then she was ordained as a priest in January 16th of 1977. Mm-hmm. It was about 25 below on that particular day. And there was a priest in the crowd who said, somebody told me that was going to be a cold day in hell before women would be ordained as a priest. And lo and behold, 25 below.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah.
David, do you have a comment?
Just to interject, it wasn't just the ordination of women in the 1980s. Dean, at the time Fontaine, put together a true integrated softball team of men and women. We were called the St. Mark's Lions, starring, his daughter Anne was the shortstop, and the women controlled the team. We won the South Minneapolis title that summer. It was a tremendous experience to have women incorporated into all aspects of our lives.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a really good point, because there was a certain camaraderie. You know, this was a community that was really it had a lot of movement, Lowell, to your point.
Yeah.
You know, there were a lot of changes that were happening, and people were energized and they were excited. And it's really fascinating to see how change can bring about community and bringing people together. And I think that was a good example of how it really impacted you and your personal experience. And we're going to come back to that in a little bit. But David, I want to switch to you just momentarily. Your experience is a little bit different in that you probably have been going here the longest of the three of the gentlemen here today. You started back in 1954 or earlier.
Well, actually, right, Jay, I was actually here in 1950 as a 3-year-old in the nursery school. Don't have very good recollection of that time, but I'm sure it was outstanding. The most fun I can remember started really strongly in 2nd grade and 3rd grade and 4th grade. And all of the Sunday school classes were held around the Whipple Chapel, which was, Carl, that was our first construction of this building, is that right?
It was, yes, and that's where services were held until this part was completed.
Until this part was completed in probably 1913. But around the Whipple Chapel, that was remarkable. We had at least 10 to 12 students in every grade level, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, in the 1950s. And we would go every week. We would have mimeographed maps. We'd love to trace the 4 journeys of St. Paul around the Mediterranean. We would learn a whale of a lot, and we'd have fun with Mr. Parker. Some of you may know him as Don Parker. Was my favorite 3rd grade teacher. My favorite 4th grade teacher was Mr. Powers, also known as Russ Powers, but we didn't call him that. And Mrs. Taylor, also known as Margaret Taylor, was the head of the whole Sunday school. Remarkable, shepherding us all. We had great fun. We had broom ball games on Lake of the Isles. We had a lot of different experiences. This, remember, was before 1961, Jay, when this new educational wing was built.
Right.
Maybe some of you don't know that we had a 2-story basketball court right there under what's now known as the banquet hall.
In the Heritage Room.
And the Heritage Room didn't exist. It was 2 stories. We had great fun playing basketball there. It was great.
Right. Margaret, you bring up Margaret Taylor. Now, she also oversaw some of the archives of the cathedral as well.
That's what I
As I
understand, yes.
recall. And was instrumental in finding Linda Shalene to take her position when she left. And we can talk more about that with Linda.
That's great.
But you recall something from Sunday school, and I think it had more to do with your confirmation classes that was particularly memorable. What was that
Well,
experience?
if you fast forward to 1960-61, we had to go to confirmation class here that was conducted by Dean Hancock himself. And this goes way back. Dean Hancock would have all of us, about 12 or 14 of us, would show up every Saturday morning from 9 o'clock till noon, April through October. So you had to learn every part of the 1928 Book of Common Prayer, inside and out. You had to learn all 66 books of the Bible: Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Hosea, Joel, Amos. Anyway, you get the idea. You had to learn it backward and forward, but that formed a foundation of faith. And I must say, that's having the foundation of faith has led to a springboard to allow us to grow over, for me in my case, over the last 75 years, grow in faith. But I think that's essential.
Right. You mentioned Dean Henry Hancock, was the dean at that time, around 1960-61. And I think I remember you telling me his wife Betty taught religion at Breck School. Is that
That's
correct?
right. They're still, their ashes are inurned there, Dean Hancock, over on the east side of the nave, and his wife Betty Hancock's ashes are right below that. So you may want to take a look at that. This is remarkable. She was a great religion teacher, and I remember when my wife Diana and I were raising our 2 children here, that we tried to get them to go to church as often as possible, but by then Sundays were largely devoted to youth sports like hockey. I mean, remember the old hymn, Carl? New occasions teach new duties, time makes ancient good uncouth. I hate to say it, but we didn't come every single Sunday.
Yeah.
So, but when we did come, we tried to participate as fully as possible with our own children. And I'm thrilled to say one of our greatest accomplishments in life was that both of our 2 sons won the 8th grade Betty Hancock Award for Religious Studies.
I was just
How about that, Carl?
I was just about to ask you
Greatest
about
achievement
the
in
Betty
life.
Hancock Award.
She is marvelous.
That is a great story. So you also are known for have said that Dean Hancock, he had a quote, or at least he said that each act is an act of symbolism, or at least that's something you learned from him.
It truly is.
And tell me a little bit more about that.
To me, Dean Hancock taught us all about symbolism. For example, you sit right behind where Jay is sitting now, 3 steps below on the floor of the nave. That is called the Great Crossing, where the seal of the Anglican Church is embedded, where I was a little child there in 1954, a little 7-year-old, where we had the first Anglican Congress here, and the Archbishop of Canterbury was here. For example, Dean Hancock, Jay, would say, we do not rise as a congregation as the ushers come forward with their offertory plates until the Great Crossing is passed and the ushers move up into the chancel. That is symbolizes our earthly gifts being transformed into the gifts for God. He said that was
I'd never
very
heard
important.
that.
We do not rise as a congregation until the ushers pass the Great Crossing.
And I suspect, in true form, to what Edwin Hewitt would have envisioned,
Yeah.
there is symbolism throughout
Oh my.
in just the sheer architecture. Carl, speaking of architecture,
I was thinking of Betty Hancock
Oh,
before we get into architecture. She never forgot a name. She knew you've been here one time. She knew your name. And Dean Hancock had many other things on his mind. She stood by him Sunday morning there at the door, and she'd say, well, here are the Hawkers. Here are the... she'd say the names of everyone that came by. And
he always knew in advance,
she always knew.
so
yeah,
he
she
could
knew
address
everyone.
people appropriately.
Right, right.
Well, these are the kind of memories that
Yeah.
really last because they're very human. They're human characteristics. They're things that
Right.
are endearing about a person. And wonderful that you guys have that in common of these memories that you have. So, Carl, getting back to the architecture.
Oh, yes.
When I think about you, I have this visual of you standing in the front of in the transept area, right before the chancel, towards the end of every service, waiting for people who might be interested in having a tour of the cathedral, right next to the pulpit. And I would love for you to talk about a few things that you think would be really important for somebody who's never been here before, but would want to learn about the cathedral, that you feel like would be something that they should walk away knowing about. Can you elaborate on that, or just talk about some of the things that are really important to you about the architecture?
Well, when I visit with someone that I haven't, someone new here, they're usually someone visiting or someone new, and find out are they Episcopalians, are they Lutherans or visitors, whatever, and talk a little bit about the Episcopal Church and where we came from, and that it's interesting that the Roman Church is up the hill, and then that became the Reformation Church here, and then the 2 Wesley brothers who are priests in the Church of England, never left the Church of England, but their preaching brought about the Methodist Church, and Mr. Hewitt did this church, and he also did the Methodist Church next door, and talk about the original church was in the 1800s. 1870 was the church downtown, and it was there until 1910, when this became the Episcopal Church, but not the cathedral until 1941.
Right.
And I point out that the original cathedral is down in Faribault, Minnesota, and it is the first church building in America, as well as the original church for cathedral in Minnesota. And begin over there by the talk about the pulpit. And a week ago Sunday, I had a couple who'd become Episcopalians from the Lutheran Church, and I said, well, we were certainly familiar with the Lutherans. We were in communion with them, and our clergy can exchange pulpits and altars and talk about the pulpit. Isaac Kirchmeier was a Lutheran who did the pulpit, and wonderful carvings of figures of history throughout the ages. And around the base, it says, "Go into the world and preach the gospel. Lo, I'm with you always." And Isaac Kirchmeier, being a Lutheran, put Luther's stylized rose 3 spots around the base of the pulpit. And then we look up there, there's a cross hanging there. And that cross is interesting because when Canterbury Cathedral was bombed in England, the medieval nails shot out from the fire. And those nails, I don't know whether they're original nails or whether they're, whether they've been
representative, yes.
But anyway, that is our connection with, one of our connections with England and Canterbury.
And just so the people who are listening understand, it's the cross that hangs right above the pulpit on the wall, behind whomever is speaking. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes,
Right.
3 medieval nails,
Cross
great
nails.
huge nails.
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
they're right there. And the carving there on the pulpit honors an early priest here who became Dean of Washington Cathedral, and so that's in his memory, and it's carved up there. The shield from our national cathedral is carved right there above the pulpit.
And not far away is the baptismal font, the original one. Can you talk a little bit
The
more about
original
that?
baptismal font came from that second church, which was downtown, 1870 to 1910. And above the little window above that came from that church. The covering on the pulpit was done. The architect was inspired by little chapel of Saint-Chapelle in Paris, and that is the covering that's there on the pulpit.
Inspired by the spire of the Saint-Chapelle
Yes,
Cathedral,
yes.
is that her church? Is that correct?
Right, near Notre Dame, that little
And
chapel.
what I understand is that that particular design of the spire is repeated in a couple other places in the cathedral, I realized. And one of them is at the very back of the nave as you exit on both sides of the door. Do you see it carved in the stone at the very back here? You can see that same shape of
Carried over that same
carried
design.
over, correct. And so, like any great design, repetition,
Is good.
is good. You see it not once, not twice, but maybe perhaps 3 times, and then you never forget it, right?
Right.
I also happen to have noticed it may appear at the very, very top of the bell tower, on each corner of the bell tower. That same shape that's carved in the limestone.
Wow, you are observant.
Well, I've just been so fascinated with this story that,
Which, by the way, Jay, which bell tower was hit twice by lightning?
that's a really good point. I remember reading that, yes. In fact, I think some chunks of granite flew quite a distance,
Yes.
as I recall. Right,
Yes.
right. And of course, since been repaired, but quite the repair job, I'm sure. Talking about the stone, talk, Carl, about the limestone that's in the building. What was so important about it?
Well,
To
let's
Edwin
begin
Hewitt.
with the altar. That's from Mankato, Minnesota.
Kasota stone, correct?
Kasota stone, yes. And at the time of the the uprising in 1870, I think, and the bishop, there were many, Bishop Whipple was the bishop, and he knew the story of this uprising and the conflict between the settlers and the Native Americans, and there was a huge number of Native Americans who were going to be hung. I think, was it 300?
Yeah.
300. And Bishop Whipple went to Washington to plead with Abraham Lincoln to save the lives of those. He wasn't successful in saving all of them, but I've forgotten the exact number that he saved. You know, Lowell?
I think there were 39 that were.
Yeah, I believe 39.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Robert Tubal's has painted as a painting, I think, called the 39, something like that.
I believe that's
Which, by the way, is the same number as the number of books in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And it's the largest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the largest execution ever in this country, sadly.
Right.
Yeah, the story.
Carl, the altar was not always where it is now.
Well, liturgically, in the altars were off the liturgical east, and the priest or the celebrant faced liturgical east, and that was the way it was until when, the 1970s.
I'm thinking it must have been after the prayer book revision.
Could be, it was later.
But the question is, why was it moved out so that the
Well, it
priest
was-
could stand behind and
Yes,
face the
so
congregation?
that became the priest would face the congregation, or the clergy would face the congregation and be a part of the congregation rather than facing the liturgical east.
Was it that Christ is in the midst of the congregation?
Exactly.
Which is why the deacon reads the gospel from the center of the congregation. Different from 1979, where I think the gospel, was just read from the lectern.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
But-
when we came here, only the clergy read the lessons in those days, and after the epistle was read, I remember Dean Hancock turning that around and reading the gospel. But back up to the altar, and so we had we brought in the old altar here and had a freestanding altar here. And Doug Fontaine didn't like that. He kept saying, it reminds me of an ironing board set up out in front of the congregation. And he said, why can't we move that altar forward? But, could see it's going to be a
Right.
difficult task. But he
Correct.
kept talking about, there was about that much space, so he could slide in and put the flowers there. And now, but anyway, he kept talking about it. So the altar guild finally commissioned having that move forward. So the first two steps you can see are new, and so there's that much space back there so the clergy can face the congregation.
And from what I understand, it's the heaviest singular piece of stone in the cathedral.
Oh, yes, a solid, yes.
Solid.
Yeah.
Talk with us a little bit more about the stained glass windows. And feel free, anybody who has any information, to chime in. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the stained glass windows over the high altar and the Te Deum windows in the back by the front doors, are those original to when the original building
Well, this
finished?
was completed, I think, in 1911. This one wasn't completed until about 1918.
Okay, so the one over the altar was the
That
first,
was the
completed
first
in
one,
1911.
the Ascension
The
window.
Ascension window.
Yeah.
And the Te Deum window, few years later, you
Yeah,
said?
in 1918, I think it
I
was
see.
completed. Yeah.
And then, one window at a time,
One window.
they were all filled in with stained glass,
Yeah,
is that
the
correct?
first two windows over there in the Hewitt Chapel, the Annunciation, the birth of the Christ, the visit of the three kings, the flight into Egypt in the temple and in the carpenter shop, those were the first two windows. And so the windows all the way around on the lower level tell the life and story and miracles of Christ. And they were completed early on.
Right.
But the clear story windows were not completed until 2002, so it took nearly 100 years.
So the visual is then, if we think about the southwest corner of the Hewitt Chapel, on the main nave level, not the clear story level, and if you just wrap around, go all the way to the front doors, and then on the east side aisle, start in the back and come forward up to the choir,
All right.
That's the order in how the windows were
Right,
added.
yes, that's the order that they were done.
And talk to me about the different color blue on the east aisle windows.
Oh, there is a name for that blue.
Well, cobalt, it's cobalt,
Yes, yeah, cobalt blue. Yeah,
but there was a change in the color of the windows, correct? So from what I remember, and feel free to jump in, but during World War II, there was a need for the mineral cobalt for wartime. And so they weren't allowing that mineral to be used to make stained glass windows. And so halfway down the east aisle, the color blue changes.
well, I'm learning something. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know that, but I am aware of the lightness. So,
Okay,
yeah,
okay. Well, it's interesting because it marks history, and it marks our country's history.
It does.
And it tells a story that unless you knew, you wouldn't be aware of. But you can see how the color blue is lighter in the first three from the back moving forward. And the last three,
I have noticed that, but I didn't know that.
the last three return back
know
to
that?
cobalt
Yes.
blue.
You knew it.
I didn't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and like one person said when we did Doors Open this past May, one of our volunteers, we told the story to, and they found a really poetic way of talking about how in hardship, meaning the dark cobalt blue during wartime, and then coming out of that and having the lighter color blue, let more light in, and I mean the symbolism can go on and on and on, but it's just a wonderful way to kind of think about the differences between those colors of blue. David?
If I could interject, Jay, just a little bit more about the symbolism before we leave the ascension window in the front of the cathedral, behind the high altar. I think it was perhaps Dean Hancock who was so into symbolism, and what a remarkable job architect Hewitt did. The symbolism of the front, to me, symbolizes the cross is the first thing that draws your attention, the great cross, meaning Jesus is with us during suffering. Below that, it's to be noted that that altar about which Carl spoke so eloquently is in the shape of a sarcophagus. The 5 marks of Christ, Dean Hancock explained, were all engraved in there, the 5 marks of his suffering. So God is with us during our suffering and in our death. You go down, then you raise up to that wood, marvelous wood, your eyes raise up to the marvelous wood carved reredos. There you see the figure of Jesus flanked immediately on his left and on his right by his contemporaries, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Outside, far to the left, you'll see Isaiah and Elijah, the past. And on the far right, his followers, Peter and Paul. The symbolism is so apparent to those who come in and visit us. The word of the Lord is with us during our suffering and in our death, in our present, in our past, in our future, even up when you look finally to the great ascension window into our ascension into heaven. That's, to me, the message I try to leave those who visit us as a docent.
Good, I like that.
I think there's a homily there.
Yes, very good, David.
When you three think about your experiences here, are there moments in time that come to mind that, not unlike the event of World War II that we just talked about, but is there something that brings you to this place that may have come from an event that happened outside of the cathedral?
Well, I think, not to cut you off, but you know, the architecture, the music, the lights, it's really the people that, like what I'm thinking is the memorial service that we had for Princess Diana and the 9/11 memorial service. And so the people, you can visualizing the pews just, was filled to capacity. And so all of these people were coming to grieve. And, what better place to grieve than a place where you can see Jesus but the architecture and the stained glass and the music all helps to not just grieve, but to worship of God, I guess. So even on a Sunday morning, all those things are intended to make us closer to God or to worship God in our own way. And they all help in that way, just the design of everything.
And besides 9/11 and the others, you mentioned the memorial service for Lady Di. Lowell, of course, after the 35W bridge collapsed,
Yeah.
we were filled with Twin Cities. This was the cathedral to which everyone from the Twin Cities flocked to support each other and to grieve. I happened to be here. One of the people who died in the collapse happened to be a woman with whom I had worked for a number of years before she moved over into what was the old Lutheran Brotherhood. But her car went down in that collapse. So,
Well, when you think about those events, it's hard not to associate them with a place of gathering where we can all share in our personal mourning and come together as a community to pass through that and to keep going on,
Yeah.
right? Keep living.
Yeah.
And that's really been the history of so many cathedrals and churches throughout history. If we think about that, I know more recently there was a memorial service here for Dean Caldwell, Bruce Caldwell.
Yeah.
And he had been part of the cathedral
Interim,
here.
right.
He had an interim
Yeah.
position here at St. Mark's Episcopal, and then took a position in Wyoming as the dean, I believe.
I was the bishop of
bishop.
Wyoming
The
before
bishop,
then.
the bishop
Right,
of
before
Wyoming.
he came back.
Thank you for that. And he has been since interned here, I believe, right? He's in the columbarium.
Didn't know that.
And so this full circle idea of always kind of finding our way back, if you will, finding that place of belonging, I think is really impactful.
Yeah.
When we think about the history. Is there anything else architecturally or not architecturally that you want to talk about that you think might be of interest? Carl, any other more
Well, I was
comments
thinking
about?
the little shield on the back of the bishop's chair.
Cathedral.
What's it
Cathedra.
called?
Cathedral.
Cathedra.
Cathedra is the shield of St. Mark's with the broken tomahawk and the peace pipe and the words peace through the blood of the cross. A little wooden carving there, and it's above the door back out here, and then the front door outside, there's a huge one above that.
And I think, Edwin Hewitt, the architect.
Oh, yes.
That was very intentional.
Oh,
he
my.
wanted all the symbolism to be regional of the area so that people felt like it was the church for everybody.
Yes.
And for people who lived here. And it was very welcoming. It didn't have the typical symbolism of, people who might have been intimidating or, may have had, come from a different higher church, or biblical context, if you will. But rather it was for the people. And so a lot of the symbolism that was carved on the building were things that you would see in the region, see things in Minnesota, the log cabin, for instance, the canoe in the river. There are numerous pieces carved into the front door, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about with the peace pipe and the indigenous connection to Minnesota, correct? Right.
Right.
One thing I would say is that you walk into some churches and cathedrals, and on the walls you see different names of people. And okay, it's kind of interesting, somebody's name, but at St. Mark's there's very few names of people that you see. There's a few on the wall over here with Frederick Payne, I think, but one thing for me, what I like to think about is one of my best of friends, Skylar Woodhull. On the column that's in one of the choir stalls, there's several Woodhulls whose names are engraved on there. I don't know how the family convinced them to add, all the Woodhull names, but I remember at the time whoever was in charge said, well, this will probably be the last name that we're going to add for anybody. So I guess we won't expect our names to be added on to.
We'll be down the columbarium.
Yeah.
The names are.
For architecture, with my interest in history, that when I came, I always thought on the front pillar here, where it said, for C. Arthur Lyman, prominent St. Markan, who gave his life in the defense of the ideal of law and order, I think it says, something like that. And I thought, whoa, that's really interesting, but obviously a prominent St. Markan, and it's right in the first column. What happened? Well, here back in the Teamster strikes of 1934, there were the employers that were fighting the Teamsters, and he ended up being tragically killed. He was on the side of the employers, but being a prominent St. Markan at the time, why, you can kind of read what happened on this front pillar here.
Mm-hmm. And as we're talking, I should point out, and I would be remiss for not mentioning this, but Lowell, you're ordained, correct?
Right.
And you did that through St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral.
Yeah, it was really what we call through the shared ministry process. So this began back in 2007 or 2008, when Dean Spencer Simrell was the dean at the time, and said that he'd like to start a shared ministry process, which would mean that people from the congregation could be ordained or commissioned, and those people would not attend seminary, but they would study together for a period of years, the scriptures and church theology and everything connected with it. And so then I was part of that, along with Siri Hauge Husted, Terry Erickson, Helen Hansen, and another fellow. So it came from the cathedral and meant that when we were ordained, we would just stay with St. Mark's rather than being sent off to a different church. And that's what's happened since 2013. Yeah.
Well, I think it's such a great journey because you talk about your beginnings in Duluth, coming to Minneapolis, finding the cathedral, going to the organ recital, never leaving since you heard that wonderful music in the space, but then having this sort of faith journey that led you to expressing yourself and sharing and witnessing your faith with others, and eventually becoming ordained. And so what an incredible story you have to share, and to those who are maybe having similar questions, a wonderful thing to think about.
Well, it's interesting because, since I was a member about 30 years before I was ordained, the first time that you get up in the pulpit to preach, you're looking at people that you've known for 30 years, and especially Ron Bailey, who died some years ago. He had this sense of humor, so I couldn't look at him during my sermon because I figured he would try to make me laugh. But another interesting thing that Ron did, and along with Marilyn Hawker, talking about youth education, there was a time back in the 1980s, I think, where they created the Wayback Machine for the kids. And so downstairs, near where the hallway where the bookstore is now, they created like a airplane, not the cockpit, but the passenger side, like an air. So you'd walk into this thing made out of cardboard, and you'd feel like you were in an airplane.
Okay.
And they had the sound effects. And then once they got off the airplane, they would walk into the old gymnasium, into this. It could be an ancient time, it could be back in the time of the prophets.
Oh, interesting.
Or
It was a
could be-
time machine.
Yeah,
Yes.
a time machine. Or it could be back to the time of Bishop Whipple. And so you
Okay.
had adults that would take the parts of these actors, whether it was Jesus or Bishop Whipple or
Right.
whoever it was. And the kids would
Oh, my goodness.
would come into the gymnasium, and their eyes would just be, look where we are now, and the adults would be, really reenacting
Well,
it.
I'll tell you a quick story, Lowell. That was fun for me as a Wayback Machine actor. I think we were doing the Feast of Purim and the story of Esther. And being nearsighted, I needed my glasses. But you couldn't wear glasses during, stay in period
right.
piece.
You had to be in
And
character.
it was very challenging for me to. What was I supposed to say? What was the script, Lowell?
Yeah.
But the kids didn't mind.
Yeah.
I was in
great.
McGobble,
Yeah.
the place. Well, I remember one little boy said I could stay here forever.
That was fun.
And so the Wayback Machine went on for several years, really popular, and then it ended at some point.
Yeah.
But then things in the cathedral kind of begin and end, like the arts festivals, which took place in the 1980s, I think it was.
Yes.
Went on for several years. Committees would work for months to arrange an arts festival. And music was composed, and arts pieces were commissioned. And the energy put into the arts festivals, and it was it for us or the community at large, right?
Right.
Because we'd announce, that there's going to be a concert or whatever it might be, and so we were trying to make us, through culture, part of the community. But yeah, and then at some point it ended.
You all have good memories of that, I can tell.
I should, another ending, if we have time, when Dean Hancock died, here was this Welsh Shakespearean trained actor, replaced by Doug Fontaine, who had a
what a
southern drawl and everything coming from Texas. And I asked Doug one time, well, was that a hard transition? And he said, well, it was the first, I think he said it was like the first month where he was, he'd be in the pulpit and he was just nervous as heck. And then along about maybe the third Sunday, he found next to the pulpit, I think it was a glass of water or something. And somehow that symbolism meant that, I think it's going to be okay here.
Voice. That was 1970.
Yeah. And so then from then on,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that had to have been quite a beginning and ending.
He was so nervous and so loud, he lost his voice preaching early one Sunday. So
Do you
I
remember?
worked with him, and they said, let the microphone do the work.
But was there a microphone?
Yeah.
There
we
was.
had- Oh, yeah, we had the microphone.
There was a microphone.
Oh,
then.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay.
But do you remember when Dean Fontaine would throw colored Easter
Oh, yes.
marshmallows out from the pulpit to us?
Quite a change from
Yes,
Dean
from
Hancock.
Right.
this very distinguished Dean Hancock.
And he was 24 years.
You mean Dean Fontaine did that or Hancock?
And the
No,
moving
Fontaine did that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
and
Hancock
moving the
was here only 12
altar
years.
forward is
Yes.
an honoring Doug
Yes.
Fontaine
Yes.
for his 24-year ministry.
Sure.
Right. Well, this is wonderful, guys. Thank you so much. Unless you have other things you want to talk about or that come to mind, I think we'll start to wrap things up here for this first Docent series talk. I want to tell you it's been such a privilege hearing your stories and getting to know you better. So again, thank you so much for your time. And
Well, let me point out Little St. Joseph by the door. That's
Oh,
one
do,
thing I
please.
always like to point
Okay,
out.
do.
This came after World War I, and Belgium was decimated, and a shipload of flour went from the city of Minneapolis to Belgium, and a member of this church was on the board there and went along to see, and in appreciation, he was given this little statue of St. Joseph, which had been above the village school, had been destroyed. And the person from America said, "Oh, we can't." He said, "We can't possibly." The fellow from St. Mark said, "We can't possibly accept that." And when he was in Belgium or in wherever, waiting to come home, he received this special delivery package, and it said, "You must receive this for the city of Minneapolis and St. Mark's Church." And it was dedicated on Easter Day, 1918, and it's been in that spot with one exception. The administrator called and said, "We've had a robbery at St. Mark's. Someone has stolen the cross and candlesticks from all Hewitt Chapel. Would you look around and see if anything else is missing?" And I walked in that door and I looked, and then Joseph was gone. I thought, oh, cross and candlesticks we can replace. But at that time they were rebuilding the steps out in front, and there was soft earth. And the person who had pulled it out of there, it broke. And the person had thrown the pieces over the fence, and they'd landed in the soft earth. And Charlie, the wonderful sexton we had here, happened to see that and brought it in and had it repaired. Doug Fontaine was here, and there was a lot of talk whether there should be something to protect it. And he said, "It's just been like that since 1918. Let's put it back just like it was." And so that's something I always like to point out.
Well, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. We wouldn't have known that had you not shared that, so thank you.
Yeah.
Jay, I don't know if you introduced yourself when we began at the...
Yeah, I mentioned my name.
You
Yes.
did, okay.
Yep, I did.
How did you get here?
How did I? Oh, are we turning the interview on me? Oh my goodness. Well, I have really great friends and former clients who are members, and I've been working with them for over 15 years, and I've been hearing about this cathedral for a very long time, even more than 15 years. And they sang in the choir, and they just said how great the choir was, and I knew eventually one day I would end up coming here. And when I moved back into Minneapolis, I decided to start coming, so that's how I got involved.
Oh,
and then
good.
became a member 2 years ago.
Well, I'm glad you got here.
Thank you. Thank you. Our journeys may not always be the same, but somehow we find our way in the same place at the end.
Oh, one thing I keep thinking of
Oh,
things, but at
please.
night, if you've ever chaperoned a youth event at night,
Okay.
the kids love to play in a darkened cathedral. What do they call the game? They hide in the closets, and it's not hide and seek. But,
The escape room games?
I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, so you find some of them, they end up in the usher's closet or, like under the pews, so and the church is dark, and all these kids they just love it because they got the run of the place.
You'll never be found.
You'll never find them.
You'll never
yeah.
be found.
Yeah, 3
exactly.
o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, you might find them.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Carl Hawker, Lowell Johnson, David Christopherson. It's been a pleasure. And I look forward to another talk, maybe coming up in the near future. Until then, bless you, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.